A lush area of greenery, a habitat for a wide array of plant and animal life, a dynamic, interactive environment. But what would happen if an invader appeared? A creature as destructive in its way as any plague or pest. An intruder that destroys by altering the ecological processes as it invades, resulting in the displacement of native plants, sometimes disrupting entire food chains. This scenario happens every day. Throughout our lands and waterways, naturally occurring species of plants are being displaced by invaders. These invasive species are plants for which our ecosystems have no natural controls to keep them in check. Plants introduced into an area to which they are not native are called exotics. Exotics are plants out of place. Aggressive non-native plants that invade an area and replace the native plant species. The impact of these invasive exotic plant species on the environment is immense. Some scientists describe the problem as biological pollution. Not all exotic plants are pests. Some species, like the Asian persimmon tree, produces larger, sweeter persimmons than the native tree. But many exotic plants have intrusive characteristics. Invasive exotic plants are a significant threat to native plant communities because they spread rampantly, grow rapidly, and reproduce precociously. In their competition for resources such as sun, water, and soil, the invasive alien plants choke out native plants. Biological diversity is further impacted when exotic plants harbor other pest organisms that decimate native species. Let's look at some examples of invasive exotic pest plants. A widespread exotic in the southeast is kudzu. Kudzu was introduced from China and has since spread, smothering and degrading vast numbers of ecosystems. Japanese honeysuckle, introduced as an ornamental in the 1800s, has spread throughout the southeast. It was also reported to have been used for erosion control along railroad right-of-ways near the turn of the 20th century. Around the same time, Melaleuca, a tree in the myrtle family and a native of Australia, was introduced into Florida to help reclaim swampland. Not all exotics were brought here deliberately. Some became established because of accidental introductions. Long before purple loosestrife was ever sold as an ornamental, it was introduced as seeds in the ballast of ships entering ports in the Northeast. A strikingly handsome plant with magenta flowers on showy spikes reaching 5 or 6 feet in height, purple loosestrife has more than 100 species of insects that control it in its native European range. But in North America, its biological controls are absent, and it is a dangerous competitor to naturally occurring flora. Once it escapes cultivation, it turns wetlands into wastelands. This has far-reaching consequences. As the wetland plant communities are severely altered, waterfowl are displaced as nesting habitat is lost. It is estimated that damage to agriculture and wildlife in the Northeast and Midwest alone runs to the tens of millions of dollars per year. The list of invasive exotics is, unfortunately, lengthy. We have only recently become aware how these plants out of place impact natural communities. Natural communities are made up of many different types of interdependent organisms. In other words, they are biologically diverse. Our wildlands, especially those remaining pristine natural areas, are this country's last refuge of native plant communities which were once abundant. They are fragments of a former landscape that are biological islands dissected by roads and highways and surrounded by a sea of agriculture, industrial development, and urban sprawl. While many wildlands are set aside and protected by laws and rules that designate them as special areas, they are all subject to invasion of exotic pest plants as introductions continue. Invasive exotics do not respect boundaries and invade natural areas, as they are planted along highways, as ornamentals in landscaping projects, for fiber, mitigation purposes, or wildlife habitat improvement. They pose a threat to natural areas because they escape where they are planted and spread boundlessly. Invasive exotics have a competitive edge when introduced because natural controls such as insects, pathogens, and other plants that keep them in place in their native range are left behind. Plants and all other organisms co-evolve over time, establishing complex biological relationships. These relationships maintain ecosystem functions. The ecological function of natural communities is severely disrupted by invasive exotic pest plants that displace native plants. Each native plant is an element of a natural community. In many cases, rare elements are disappearing forever because of impacts on natural communities. The change caused by invasive exotic plants to natural communities has a profound impact on ecological function that results in a significant loss of biodiversity. Like a sour note in a symphony, exotic interlopers disrupt how ecosystems function and quickly change natural areas into management nightmares. These natural areas soon lose their integrity unless exotic removal actions occur. Invasive exotic plants have no natural controls within the community. They grow and mature rapidly. They have prolific reproductive capacities and are successful in seed dispersal, germination, and colonization. In some cases, the result of this competitive edge is that they ultimately displace the wildlife that depends on the native vegetation for food. Although the corridors through which invasive exotics have been brought into this country are very different, the impact of these introductions has been the same: destruction of the natural ecosystem. Examining how these plants out of place were initially brought here will help prevent future introductions. But many of the introductions were deliberate. Kudzu, honeysuckle, multiflora rose, and many other plants were introduced into this country intentionally along highways or as ornamentals in landscaping. We are now battling plants out of place with greater manpower than that with which they were planted in the first place. Commercially, some exotic plants with invasive characteristics are profitable because they grow rapidly and have a high survival rate. An example is autumn olive, which is sometimes found in commercial nurseries and is frequently used by state and federal agencies for wildlife plantings. On a global scale, travelers can now move freely from continent to continent, carrying seeds and plants with them, creating opportunities for exotic plants to gain a foothold in places that have no natural checks for their prodigious reproductive capacities. Having few natural controls or natural enemies means that exotics can take advantage of every opportunity. Especially threatening are those plants that degrade globally rare natural communities, such as cedar glades in Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky, or the May Prairie in Manchester, Tennessee. So prolific in growth and reproduction are some alien invaders that they create homogeneous vegetation of a single species which impact biological interactions. The cost to maintain natural areas in the face of this type of invasion is high. 10,000 acres, nearly 87,000 football fields of the Everglades, is now Brazilian pepper. The program necessary to keep the plant from spreading and choking out more native species costs the taxpayers millions of dollars a year. All the ways we've devised to deal with exotic plants are time and labor intensive and expensive. Eradication programs that involve physical removal of pest vegetation and root systems early in their growth cycle have been fairly successful in some urban areas. However, the magnitude of the exotic invasion in vast natural areas like the Smokies makes physical removal strategies like hand-pulling, digging up rootstock, and cutting an ongoing task. Selective use of chemicals is an option when the only alternative is a loss of native habitat from invading species. Where invasions are so widespread and extensive, control of exotics may only be accomplished by biological control. What can we do to help stop the spread of these exotic pests? Promote responsible landscaping practices. This can be accomplished using native species along roadsides and other corridors that are near natural areas. Exotic species that might naturalize should not be planted in any location where there is even a remote possibility of disrupting the local ecosystem. Organizations such as the Exotic Pest Plant Council facilitate communication and education to provide a forum for discussion. It also can provide advice on funding, research, management, and control of pest plants. The things you can do to help are: get involved and support organizations that protect biodiversity. Plan and implement a program to remove invasives and restore native plants. Ask your nursery to stock propagated native plants. Within their native range, all plants have a place. They are elements within a naturally evolving ecosystem. But when removed from their native region and planted elsewhere, they pose the risk of becoming biological time bombs. Plants out of place are plants that displace our natural heritage. The most important thing we can do to control future impacts is prevent future introductions.